welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day weekend last Sunday. I certainly did, and took the night off. And as many of you may already know, and those who are seeing the show for the first time, I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, I think I have a really great show for you. I'm really excited about the guests that I have. I'm excited every Sunday about the guests that I have, but in particular, we're going to talk and focus on North Carolina this Sunday. One thing, when you normally hear about North Carolina in the national news, you're hearing about new jobs coming, new corporations, checking out the beautiful state of North Carolina. It's a great business climate and all of that good stuff. However, the past couple of weeks have been challenging for North Carolina. We've been in the news for all of the wrong reasons, and we're going to talk about that this evening. We're going to talk about what we're seeing in the state of North Carolina, whether or not you live in whatever state you live in. There's an obvious GOP playbook at hand, and we're going to discuss it. All right, so let me start introducing my guests. The first one I'll bring up, we have Representative Dr. Amber Baker. All right. She is a servant leader of North Carolina District 72, Forsyth County. She has led the Kimberly Park School as its principal for more than a decade and has improved the lives of children and families in Winston-Salem. She holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Winston-Salem State University and a master's and PhD from The Ohio State University. Dr. Baker serves as vice chair of the Forsyth County Democratic Party's African American Caucus. Welcome to the show, Representative Baker.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you. I don't see, okay. So next we have up is Nicole Quick. Nicole is a community activist, organizer, wife, and mother. We know those roles well on this show. She serves as PAC treasurer and policy fellow for Carolina Forward. Previously, Nicole served as chair of the Guilford County Democratic Party. And in 2020, she ran a very close race for the North Carolina House. Nicole has her master's in economics and her bachelor's degree in politics and economics. She didn't tell me what schools. Her organization, Carolina Forward, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy organization that communicates progressive ideas, policies, and values to build a stronger North Carolina that works for all of its people. Welcome, Nicole, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Pam.
Absolutely, absolutely. And right now, I don't see our Representative Abe Jones. I've texted him, and I tried to call him, and I couldn't get him. Representative Baker, I know he's your seatmate. Were you able to reach him? Do you know where he is? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Let me see if I can reach him real quick while we continue to move forward. Let me see.
All right. Yeah, I tried to text him and everything, call him too. Okay. All right. Let me get past this. Okay. So for the questions. All right. Before the grand defection of Tricia Cotham of Mecklenburg County, from Democrat to Republican, Dr. Baker, what were you focusing on as a legislator? What was your focus at that time?
Well, as a veteran educator, my focus is always on education, and at that time, we knew that we had some policies going to be coming down through the form of vouchers, and also we know that CRT is not a real thing.
Yes.
The suppression of information regarding our history, and particularly our African American history, has also been a part of what they focused on this year, along with putting commissions in place that is essentially stripping away the power from the State Board of Education, whose job is to determine what the curriculum is, and putting it in the hands of political appointees. So at the time that the defection occurred, that's what my focus was, and didn't ever have an opportunity to speak with her. Was excited when another educator had been elected to the legislature. I was not aware of her previous time and commitment there. So I was surprised in the sense that with everything that was weighing on us being able to hold the governor's veto, that she chose to make that decision. Not really surprised in a sense that she never really made the connection um, with us in the caucus. And so my focus is not on her actions at this point because it's absolutely nothing we can do about that. But I continue and remain committed with our fellow Democrats who are committed to fighting and standing in unity and solidarity and continue to work on the issues that reflect our people. So whether it's ensuring that we take a stand for education, women's reproductive rights, uh, voter suppression. We know that gerrymandering maps are coming. That's what we're going to focus our energy on. And so we remain committed as a caucus to fighting those issues and making sure that doing programs like this, we can continue to raise people's level of awareness about what's just going on in Raleigh.
Okay. All right. Very good. So I thought that Abe would be here now because I was going to ask the rhetorical question of who bullied her. She said she had emoji bullies. That I guess it hurt her feelings or whatever. So I guess that's neither here nor there. But that's what she stated in her reply as to why she defected to the Republic, to a whole nother party, which I don't know.
Well, I mean, my seatmate is not here, and I most certainly can speak to that. If that is the case, then I would say that she shouldn't ever run for reelection, or to be reelected to that seat. As we know, politics is a grown-up sport. And people are not always going to agree with your position or your stance, and then just being disagreeable. If you have thin skin, then your feelings are going to always stay hurt, right?
That's right.
And then I grew up in the Black church, and my pastors always told me, don't let nobody run you off from your church. Just because they hurt your feelings or they do something that you don't like. So I believe that when you're looking for an excuse, anyone will do. And in that instance, I would say that's the excuse she's using. And it's a sorry excuse to totally betray the people of Mecklenburg who voted for her, believing that she was going to stand on those principles that she campaigned on, and most certainly the issues that were important to the people in District 112 in Mecklenburg. So, they will have to hold her accountable for what she's done, and hopefully the rest of the state will do as well.
Okay, so Nicole, most all of the questions are the same for the representatives, but for you, I have a twist on them. So, is there any remedy for Tricia Cotham's constituents? She ran and won as a Democrat. She ran and won against Yolanda Holmes, Jay Holman, and Rodney Moore. So it seems to me is there nothing that can be done? Nothing?
So Pam, unfortunately, North Carolina does not have a recall system, so we cannot recall her from that position. She's going to serve out that term unless something happens. That being the case, we need to vote her out this next cycle. And Carolina Forward has actually already stepped up to the plate for that. After she switched sides, we actually sent out mailers to, I want to say 12,000 households in her district, letting them know about her betrayal of them. And we ended up reaching about 16,000 voters. So that is our first step, is making her voters aware so that they know she is not serving the constituents. She is in a very blue district in County. And those constituents voted for a representative who would support progressive values.
Right.
In particular, they voted for a representative who would support choice and reproductive rights. She campaigned on that. She asked for Planned Parenthood's endorsement. She asked for Lillian's List endorsement. She touted that she was an advocate for reproductive rights. And then she turned around and was the deciding vote for this restrictive abortion ban. I can't even imagine what it's been like to be in Dr. Baker's shoes and with the other representatives since this has all happened. So I honestly just feel for you, and I appreciate the fight all of you are putting up, continuing to put up the good fight. But I would have a hard time looking her in the face every day, and I hope her constituents will remember this. We're going to help remind them throughout this session and as the 2024 election approaches. And hopefully one of those other candidates who didn't make it out of the primary is running again and will defeat her.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. Representative Baker, did you know any of those Democratic candidates that ran against her? The Yolanda Holmes, Jay Holman, or Rodney Moore? Did you know any of them?
I don't. Forsyth County is actually in Winston-Salem, and Winston-Salem is about 90 to 100 miles from Charlotte. Yes. And so it takes all I have just to kind of stay involved in our local politics, and where I can try to support the presumptive nominee for districts. But in that case, I cannot say that I knew any of them, but I most certainly will get to know whoever decides to run again and run against her. And I would say to Nicole, I absolutely have no problem with looking her in the eye. She, on the other hand, will have problems with looking me in the eye. That's right. Because I don't have a reason to hold my head in shame. I have no reason to sit at my desk with my head held down, because I am doing what I told people in the great district of Forsyth County, and to those that look to me to be a leader for our party. So she is the one really who is a person without a true party. And it is also a slap in the face to the Republican women who honestly may believe the values that party stands for. But now you have someone that has used it as a political motive to gain personally. And so we just have to wait and see what was the price of her selling her soul to the party that she has always claimed to love so much.
Interesting. Okay, so we know what has happened to women's reproductive rights in North Carolina just a few days ago. What can we expect in terms of Medicaid expansion? I'm Representative Baker. I know that we all celebrated it in theory, but we knew that we had to get the budget passed in order to have a real party about it, right? So tell me, what are your thoughts about that now? How I don't have a good sense of how that's all going to work.
Well, they have some fail-safe measures in here, and Nicole, please feel free to jump in if you want to. I know you guys have studied this issue as well, and so we don't have a budget right now, right? We've only passed the budget out of the House, and not necessarily for you two ladies, but for those that are listening and may not understand the process. The governor presents a budget, which he has no say in whether the budget gets passed or not. The governor gave us his budget back in February. Very easy to read. It was broken up into subcategories. Anybody could flip through it, and it looks very much like what you would see when you think about a budget that's presented with data to support the ask. Very clear. However, what we passed out of the House was over 1,200 pages, about almost 900 pages of allocations, and an additional almost 500 pages of policy. And so once we passed that budget, which had no input from Democrats, it was totally created and decided upon from the Republican Party. And I voted no because of the policies that existed. I think that we should be able to pass a budget that does not have policy in it. But oftentimes the really bad policies, if there can be anything worse than what we've already seen, oftentimes is buried in the budget because it does not allow for debate. You can try to offer amendments to make bad bills less bad. And in this case, we offered over 40 amendments, and of those 40, only 2 were accepted. Once the budget is passed out of the House, then it goes to the Senate. And then the Senate puts together their version of the budget. Again, their budget just dropped on Tuesday. So I have not had a complete opportunity to look through what they are proposing. They still are debating and offering amendments to their budget. Once that budget is passed, then what happens is the 2 chambers puts together what is known as a conference committee. Those members are chosen by the speaker and the speaker pro tem in the Senate. And then those individuals will go into the conference and then to begin to negotiate what ultimately will become the final budget. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but I feel it's important for people to understand that even though they've heard that the budget has passed out of the House, that we still do not have a final budget. And it's important to also know that some of the triggers that are attached to Medicaid expansion. One has to do with a budget being passed. If a budget is not passed, then the legislation that we signed concerning Medicaid expansion then does not go into effect. They've also put some additional caveats in place around Medicaid expansion that if at any time the reimbursement rate from the federal government drops below 90%, then it goes back. So those are 2 major things that people should be on the lookout for. I know that on the Senate side, they still are nursing a requirement that people, that there should be a work requirement, which is absolutely asinine in the sense that sometimes you have people that are asking for Medicaid expansion because of debilitating illnesses that do not allow for them to work. But yeah, and so it ultimately was probably saddest of all of this is we see it nationally and then at the state level where the people who have the least, who work the hardest, are the ones that they are wanting to penalize the most. And so the ones who are more wealthy, who are able to do more, should do more. And we hear this all the time: to whom much is given, much is required, right? But not in the state of North Carolina. That's not the case. And with the voucher bill that just passed, is what that's a primary example of that.
We're going to get to that a little bit later. Okay. Let me switch off to Nicole. Nicole, what is Carolina Forward doing? Listen, I had never heard of you guys. I learned of you guys on Instagram, and I I follow and I comment. One of my comments has gone viral on your page.
Oh, great.
It's gotten like over 400 likes and some other things too. And I was like, oh, gee, didn't know that. But listen, I am so impressed with the information that you guys are putting out and the infographics that you do and how you break down complex issues and make it in bite-sized format so that the average person can understand it. And that is so important because this policy stuff, it just, it gets people's minds, it gets so confusing. So what are you guys saying about this upcoming budget? And like with Representative Baker was saying, this possibility of them saying, oh, well, you need to work to deserve some of this Medicaid stuff and just all of this foolishness. What are you guys saying, and how can we help push forward your messaging to educate the people?
Great question, Pam. So when they announced they had passed Medicaid in both the House and the Senate, everybody was very excited, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're 10 years late to the party, but they're finally there. So, that doesn't help the people who needed that assistance before now, but it's good news going forward. But again, it is tied to the budget. Like Dr. Baker said, there are all these little poison pills in there, right? Like the work requirement. But also, there are other things in the budget, which she alluded to, the school voucher line item and the amount of money that's going to be going to the school voucher program. And we are just trying to communicate to voters what's going on. Because when you have a budget, how long did you say that was, Dr. Baker? 12,000 pages or something?
Yeah. Yeah. I should hold it up. So you guys can just see how large it is. It's like 3 reams of paper.
Right. So we are trying to communicate that information to voters and people in North Carolina in a way that they can understand it without having to go through 12,000 pages of legalese, as it were. So you mentioned our Instagram account. We also have a TikTok channel. Our executive director is great at breaking things down on TikTok and explaining how everything works. We use the graphics. We are also doing polling on a lot of issues across the state. So we're doing, we're the leader in polling for progressive across the state. And we're trying to communicate that information and get that information out on social media, digital media, through the press, and make sure that more people actually know what's going on. Because for the longest time, most of the political messaging for state politics was coming from the conservative side, right?
Yes.
So they had organizations in place that got out the message they wanted to get out. And the truth of the matter is, we're not a conservative state.
No,
People think we are if they're watching the news or whatever, but we're a purple state. And a lot of people actually have progressive views, and we're becoming more progressive. So we need to let the voters and constituents know that. So that's a part of what we're doing, not only with our polling, our policy papers, and the digital media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube that you mentioned. So all of that is out there. We'll continue to do targeted ads. We did an abortion ad before this last election. It reached over 800,000 individuals in targeted districts around the state. So hopefully we can make a dent and we can let some people know what's going on so they're more informed when they go to the polls, and they will be better voters and vote for policies that are good for them.
Yes, absolutely good for them. And that's one of the biggest issues that I have. One of the criticisms I often have among my friends about the Democratic Party is that sometimes you get in your silo and you think, well, The Republicans have them, meaning people in rural counties and things like that. So we won't talk to them. And that's foolish because the very policies that they enact really go against what's in their best interest.
That's right.
And so often it is because we do not communicate or do not communicate well that people are missed, and unnecessarily so.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I would also submit that it's not just about getting information, but we have to run candidates in those counties, right?
Mhm.
And I know that one of the focuses and pushes for our state party now is to make sure that we have candidates in our 100 counties, because it's not enough for us to educate our rural voters and to push them to the polls and not offer them a candidate to give for them to cast their ballot for. And this is just my own also recent epiphany, is that when we talk about leaving rural counties behind, I said, have we not even continued that by not going out and aggressively recruiting candidates for them to have a choice? When we don't give them a choice, by default, we keep sending the same people back. So I think it's important for us not only to inform them, but to also offer them candidates for them to consider voting. Because keep in mind, those counties in rural America were Democrat for so very long. So it's not that we can't win them back, but we have to be strategic in how we do woo them back to the party.
I agree absolutely. And we absolutely cannot give up on them because we have 100 counties in North Carolina and 5 of those are big urban counties, right? So, I mean, we have more growing every day. New Hanover's going to be blue before long. I'm sure it's on the way, but we have mostly rural counties and we can't just write those folks off. They need help too. And we need to be connecting with them and getting out there. And I think it's important that progressives are out there talking to them and learning what their needs are, because in my opinion, a lot of these issues that the GOP are pushing, conservatives in North Carolina are pushing right now, are to divide us so that people will vote against their best interest. If they get people fired up about issues that are non-issues like CRT,
Yes.
then folks will ignore the fact that, hey, Duke Energy's getting this huge tax break and we're paying for their coal ash cleanup with higher rates. They're not paying for it. They get to take home their profits, right? So they seek to divide us, and we really have more in common than we have different.
And they continue to push national issues, right? And that, as you mentioned earlier, Nicole, with the polls that you guys did, along with Republican-leaning organizations, organizations that consider themselves to be neutral and nonpartisan, all of the data was saying the same thing about women's reproductive rights. That currently there are more North Carolinians that believe that we should even continue with the 20-week ban and even extend it beyond what we currently have in law. But they most certainly support a woman's right to make the decision about her own reproductive rights. And so to the point I was making is that they're pushing these national issues. And while they're pushing the national issues, those very real state issues that affect all of us, whether it is the Duke Energy piece or their push to take the tax rate for businesses to zero, the fact that we have over $3 billion sitting in unreserved funds with an anticipation of adding additional $3 billion. So that's $6 billion that is sitting right now when our people in the state are hurting. And
they can't fund our schools, right?
Right. And we're losing teachers and we're losing nurses and we're losing all of these professions because the starting teacher's pay is $37,000, which is $7,000 below what is considered poverty. And so you don't even get to the poverty level as an educator until you get a master's and you have 25 years plus of experience.
It's ridiculous. And that it is a perfect segue into my next question. It was about also about the North Carolina state budget. Will state employees get realistic 2023 pay wages for the state of North Carolina, even to be competitive in the marketplace? Listen, there's so many vacancies in state government. It's ridiculous. And I, on my regular job that I do for the county government, I can see it directly because I work for a county agency that relies on the state to provide me with information. And I have to fuss and, really demand that they present it to me in a way that I can disseminate it to county residents. It's all in communications. And I could tell there was a distinct difference during the pandemic when they staffed up with contractors. Afterwards, they staffed down, and it's just not a good thing. So it's really frustrating, and a lot of it is because the pay is not competitive. So what's going to happen with that? Because North Carolina has they've been squirreling away money. We've got a ton of money.
So to your question about a realistic pay raise, their idea of what's realistic and what is actually realistic is two different things. They hold the line on the fact that they think that they have invested more money in education, that the pay raises that they've offered are comparable to what should be given. And even Dr. Wesley Harris, who's also one of my representatives, one of my colleagues, and he's a representative out of Mecklenburg and running for state treasurer, he holds a doctorate degree in economics. So they don't want to hear when he gives them the analysis of how our state has not kept up with inflation, and that these 2.5% raises don't even begin to bring up the level of pay for our state employees and cost of living for our retirees. So the reality of it is, Pam, is that they don't want to hear facts. They don't want to deal in reality. They want to offer just enough so that they can control the narrative that they are doing things for the people, when in reality, that's not true.
Yeah. I definitely know that. And I saw where Phil Berger is saying that his ultimate goal, he wants to lower the tax, and then the corporate tax rate will be to zero. Excuse me, off of whose backs?
That's correct.
Off
And
backs.
That's correct. And last year during my floor debate, I reminded not only the legislators but people who were listening that at the height of when North Carolina was considered the four leader in education, and when we had Fortune 500 companies moving to the state under the leadership of Governor Hunt, we didn't have a zero tax break. That tax rate isn't what drew people to North Carolina. In fact, what was drawing businesses to move their headquarters here and to expand their base here was our strong public education, our strong community colleges, and our strong universities. And under the leadership of Governor Hump, he was the forefront, the leader in early childhood education, fully funding education, and our schools were so much more successful then. So to say that to take a business to a zero tax rate, it further pushes the responsibility of making government go on the backs of the people. And even though we have great businesses coming to our state, as you mentioned at the top of the hour, we've got to make sure that we not only have businesses that people can access of all educational levels, but we
Right.
have to have a solution to the housing crisis in the state, which we don't. We
No.
also have to have a strong workforce development plan that will allow people access and pathways out of poverty. When you put those three things in place, you pay people decent wages, you ensure that they have a quality of life with a good, strong health care, you make sure that you have a multi-tiered access to good quality housing, then you will start to see our schools improve, and you will see that even more businesses will want to come to our state.
Right.
But we are counterproductive. The decisions that they are making is counterproductive to what will take this state from good to great.
Right.
She's
Right.
exactly right. I mean, corporations aren't going to want to continue to come here just for a zero tax rate.
Mhm.
If they can't find an educated workforce, if
That's
they can't
right.
move here and send their kids to good schools, they're
Right.
not going to want to come. I mean, and those corporations are coming here and they're using our infrastructure, but they're not paying their fair share,
That's right.
right?
Right.
So, if they're going to use it, they need to be able to contribute. We don't need to
Mhm.
be footing the bill as working individuals and families.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and huge payouts to their board of directors. I mean, if we're going to give them these lower tax rates, there should be some caveats in there that ensures that these large companies will give back to the community, either through a universal pre-K fund, so that we can ensure that we have that, or to a housing fund. I'm not really sure. I haven't really hammered that all out in my mind, but I do feel like that if we're going to give these corporations who make huge profits off the backs of our taxpayers, that as a part of our community, they should have some responsibility for ensuring that our communities stay strong.
Or maybe they could even contribute to our local community colleges for education to train people to work in these higher paying jobs,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that would be fantastic. But
Yes.
yeah, right now it's not happening. And the thing that gets me about the education bit is they won't fund our schools.
Mhm.
They continually fail to meet their requirements to fund our schools. They won't pass sensible gun legislation to protect our kids at school. And then they say they're spending all of that money on the voucher program because our schools aren't good. Well, they specifically set out to make our schools fail. They're the reason. So
Well, and that's what I've said on the floor debate, that 10 years ago they deliberately set out to defund public education, to basically gut it. And now they come forward criticizing the state of public education without accepting any responsibility to the contributions that they have made that has weakened our state of public education. And so then I tell them, how dare they stand as the definitive authority on how to fix something that they broke. We also have $12 million, as I asked the woman on the other side. She didn't even know how much money was sitting in that account. She didn't even know how many scholarships had gone to children in poverty, right? That's what they like to say.
Yeah.
She didn't know what the original target number was for the students that they had hoped to reach. And again, my question to her and to others on the floor is, if we have not used what's already in there, it's $12 million sitting already in there. And what they're proposing over the next 9 years will be will cost us almost $200 million. The per pupil spending is almost $11,000 per student. What they're proposing is that be paid directly to a parent who can then take their child to any school now,
No.
right?
Yeah.
And also in the law, as it's written, is it also says that the school can still hold parents accountable for meeting their admissions requirements. Well, I've worked in private schools, and that's code talk for gatekeeping.
Yeah.
And so in private schools, if you don't meet their admission requiremements, either through the series of tests that they take or based on what your educational diagnosis is, if you have a special needs or a child that's been diagnosed as in need of additional services, i.e. special ed, IEP, well, it depends on what the needs of that child is. And
Right.
so if the child has any kind of behavior issues, they will discount them. If they have a diagnosis that they don't want to address in their school, they don't take them.
That's
Yeah, if they
and
don't perform
that
academically, they don't take them. Right.
Did
So
you now as far as I'm concerned, in charter schools, from my previous experience in the school system, I've witnessed that type of disparity when a child had special needs and was in a charter school and then they were transferred into the public school.
and we have to take them, right?
There was
I've
no
talked about this before.
Yeah.
My
and
son is on the spectrum, and we've encountered that. If the private school can just say, we can't meet his needs, we don't have the resources to help you, and they can turn you away.
Correct.
Well, tax money shouldn't be going to
Absolutely.
schools that can turn people away, whether it's because of their abilities, they have special needs, whether it's because they need busing or they need reduced lunches,
Right.
whether it's any of that.
And if you go back and look at the floor debate, that one of the amendments that Representative Von Hafen tried to run was that students who were already in private school would not now be eligible to come back and apply for a voucher because their parents were already paying for the tuition. And so, rightfully so, they should not now come back and ask for $11,000 tax break. That's what essentially it is, right?
I just can't believe that we're even discussing this
Yeah.
because how is that fair? I do not want my tax dollars going to someone having a private education.
Correct.
When it's called public education for a reason.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's supposed to get it. And it's just not fair. It's not right.
Well, and even though my seatmate is not here, he so eloquently pointed that out during his floor debate. And I will say this, that the arguments that were offered that day by my colleagues were brilliant. They were factual. They were without emotion. Like, sometimes we get discounted if we get too emotional, that we're playing to an audience, but the delivery of those arguments were succinct and factual. And my seatmate pointed that out so eloquently. And after a couple of hours of them really being hammered with facts, at one point when I was questioning the other person, I refused to mention her name. I liken it to Beetlejuice. I think if you say it too many times, something's gonna happen. But so part of decorum is when you're questioning the bill sponsor, they can decide whether or not they want to continue their line of questioning. About 3 or 4 questions in for me, she said this will be the last question. She said, so essentially she didn't want to take any more questions from me. Right. And so I talked about that. I talked about the fact, and this is not hyperbole. I worked in a private school. I know that what they pay for is exclusivity. I said they do not want their children to attend with everyone. So that's what they pay for. Now, full disclosure, I also was a charter school director. And the difference between charter school and private schools is that charter schools are public schools. They are supposed to take every child that walks through their doors. I know, but I'm just saying the difference is they are supposed to. Private schools don't have to.
Okay.
Right? So I'm not saying it's wrong when they turn them away at the charter schools, but we do have some recourse in that, right? You file a complaint against a charter school that's turned their child away, they could lose their charter to continue to operate. And parents have to do that. They have to hold them accountable. But there's a private school in Raleigh, the tuition is $58,000.
What?
And that's not including fees. It's not including athletics or any $58,000. And I got it from their website. And so it's not fuzzy math as she alluded to. No, I went to a website in Raleigh. I went to one in her county. Tuition at a charter school in her county, a private school in her county is almost $29,000. That doesn't include before or after school care, does not include their fees.
Where are these people working at? Because they can afford this kind of stuff.
Well,
it's not even college.
Yeah. Well, $58,000 is more than what a student who's going to a state school is going to pay in the 4 years in North Carolina.
Yeah, it's just it all just blows my mind. One of the things, now that we're speaking about education, and I know your seatmate Abe Jones, who was supposed to be on the show today, isn't here. And he was debating the situation about education and what have you.
That's
and
correct.
Then for whatever reason, I don't even know how Jeff McNeely, the Iredell County Republican, thought that his comment even computed to what he was trying to say. I didn't get it. But the bottom line is, he used a controversial racial trope. He stated that was his athleticism and his race, was that the reason why he went to Harvard? Representative Abe Jones went to Harvard undergrad and stayed there and went on to law school. And we're here to talk for himself. So, seatmate Baker.
Yeah, let me tell you about my seatmate. And I'm sorry he's not here, but perhaps he wouldn't even tell you, because that's the kind of man that he is. Brilliant. And I say arguably, probably not well, the most brilliant person on that floor. The man quotes Shakespeare, Aristotle, the classics when he's debating. He uses words that I love the King's English, but his vocabulary is at such a level that sometimes I have to Google the words myself to say, okay, what did he just say? But more importantly, he is a man's man. He thinks and weighs the issues for himself. He is not he does not toe the party line, but he does stand with the party when it comes to the issues that are critical. He is a statesman. When I think about how a man or a woman who holds the positions that we have been allowed to hold through our elected offices, is how he carries himself. He is a gentleman. Never a kind word, unkind word. And so for him to be called into question as to whether or not his admission to one of the Ivy League institutions was based on his athleticism or his academic ability was just ludicrous. Coming from a man who everything that he has in his life has been given to him. You know, he inherited his family business from his father, who inherited it from his father. He's an NC State legacy. So I guess the fair question could be asked to him: were you admitted to NC State because you're a legacy? And so it just was disrespectful. I mean, the long and short of it, it was disrespectful. And even though they pieced together the comment and then the eventual response, what you guys couldn't be privy to was that exchange McNeely it continued for several seconds before Leader Reeves actually hit his light and jumped up, because I had hit my light. The speaker did not immediately stop that conversation. So you guys didn't see that because they pieced it together. In fact, it all happened that way, but it was really worse than what you saw. And it wasn't until Leader Reeves jumped up and made the statement that then the speaker stopped the debate. And McNeely, my seatmate, tried to continue to get his thoughts out as other people were kind of speaking over him until the speaker actually stopped it all and told him that he could complete his thought. So the purpose they were trying to do, I believe, besides disrespecting him, which is, obviously the most important issue, was to disrupt his thought. Because the information that he was giving, again, was factual, and they didn't have a response to that. They didn't have, as a matter of fact, they didn't have a response to any of the questions or any of the statements were made on our side. Because again, this was not about hyperbole for us. This was not about trying to get a mic moment or get our 30 seconds of fame. This was about educating the people, and that's what he was doing. And again, he didn't deserve it.
No.
And because again, he is such a gentleman, when the apology was offered, he accepted it, and he went on to even say that, he's spoken to McNeely, that they've never had a crossword, and so he would accept his apology. That is a giant of a man, right?
Because I quite frankly, I don't accept it. But anyway, I digress. Nicole, what is our strategy? What is our strategy to get these issues turned around some kind of way? What can we do strategically? Because now, help me out here. Are we going to, I haven't heard anything from the Supreme Court with that case from Carolina about the gerrymandering the districts. Remember? It was supposed to be here, and and then it kind of went away. And I have to admit, as much as I am in the news, reading the news, I work in the news, I am even having a very hard time keeping up with everything. So where do we stand with that?
So actually, it's funny you asked that, because I was a plaintiff on all of those cases for going back to 2017. I've been a plaintiff on all of these gerrymandering cases, trying to fight against that. And, the North Carolina Supreme Court had come back and had overturned the maps that were drawn after the census, and we had to redraw, or the legislature had to redraw congressional and Senate maps, and the House actually came to an agreement on a House map that was passed. But, as soon as they won those seats on the Supreme Court and flipped the Supreme Court this past November, they made a plan to go ahead and overturn that ruling, which is almost unheard of in the law, right? I mean, you have precedent, and that those cases had been decided, but they ignored that precedent, and now with their conservative majority on the Supreme Court, they overturned that, and the word is they are drawing new maps for Congress, for the state Senate, for the state House. They're going to redraw them all to suit themselves. And the state Supreme Court has said there's no such thing as partisan gerrymandering. They can do it if they want to do it. We had a case up before the U.S. Supreme Court, but it is likely going to go away, because they're going to say, all right, well, the North Carolina Supreme Court has already ruled on this, so there's nothing for us to look at or decide. So 5 years of cases fighting gerrymandering, and here we are. Who knows what the maps will look like? I will tell you that North Carolina can still win, progressives can win statewide races, because as we talked about earlier, those the state's turning bluer. It's turning bluer, and they can only stop that tide for so long, regardless of how badly they gerrymander. But we can win statewide races because the state itself can't be gerrymandered. The legislative districts can be, but only for so much longer, because we're becoming more and more blue. And the key is that we've just got to get out there and continue getting this messaging out. Let
Yes.
people know what the conservatives are saying. Show them the video of McNeely and of our lieutenant governor making these statements
Oh my
that are
God.
so offensive and so crazy, and make sure people see that and are aware of it, so that they're informed when they go to the polls, because a lot of them just have no idea and they need to see it.
Mhm. And an incident that had occurred the night before, when we actually opened the session, that Leader Reeves had to speak to, was the fact that one of our colleagues during the debate, Representative Diamond Staten Williams, gave a really impassioned speech about why we needed to uphold the governor's veto, and she shared the personal information of her and her husband having to make a decision not once but twice to have a medical abortion, because of challenges to her, and possibly could have cost her life. And she talked about it in the context of being a Christian woman, and that growing up in the church and loving the Lord, and still being thankful that she had an opportunity to access abortion care around her particular situation.
Right.
And they oftentimes try to crouch that, or the argument about abortion rights, around morality, right?
Yes.
And so and we know morality can't be legislated, but
No.
a very personal voice was, even though she delivered the speech, with strong conviction, but it's still, you could hear the cracking in her voice as she recounted that.
Yeah.
Only to find out the next morning that Keith Kidwell, who is one of the biggest bullies down there, is speaking to an attorney. I mean, not an attorney, a reporter in the earshot of our pages, who are 16, 15, 16, 17 years old, and said, "I don't know what church she attends. She must attend the Church of Satan."
Oh my.
In the earshot, and it ends up in the paper. That gets printed in the paper.
Oh.
So Leader Reeves had to really address that um, as soon as we opened session. So Keith Kidwell did not offer an apology for that.
Of course he didn't.
Um,
He felt he was entitled to say what.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that day, in particular, and I would argue that they came in with their feelings on their sleeve, because again, the day before, the arguments that were made by the Democrats that spoke on the floor were brilliant, and not rooted in anything other than the law, personal experiences, and it was interesting. We were hopeful that that other one would have voted to uphold the veto, because before she switched to the other side, she
Exactly.
had signed on with all of the other Democrats, all 48 others of us, all 49 at that time, to codify Wade. And she was one of the ones that signed on to that bill. So they came that day already feeling sensitive, because again, as I said to them, because they talked to us privately, and many of them didn't want this bill. They didn't want to have to vote against the governor on this particular issue. I think it pans out to what the data is showing in terms of that people don't want an abortion ban, but
No.
they're not courageous enough to speak up.
Right.
And so I spoke to that, and I said to them, if your fear is that if you vote to uphold the governor's veto, that the people won't vote for you, I disagree. I think they will stand with you because you're voting their will.
Right.
But that's not enough.
The statistics met it out. I mean, absolutely does.
Absolutely.
Nicole, I'm going to give you the last word from Carolina Forward's perspective of what you guys are doing next. And listen, you all and anybody listening that's in this vibe of progressive movement, you have an open door to be on the show. I struggle and sometimes finding guests and things to try to keep up with the latest topics and whatnot. But the whole purpose of having the show is to educate the public. It's something that's recorded. We do it live, but guess what? It's recorded. You can send it. You can, email it, do whatever you need to do to make your point or make your campaigns or whatever you want. So please, please, you see, I've got my email address running around on the crawl. Just reach out. Let me know, So Nicole, tell us what to do. Tell us what to do, Nicole.
I wish I had all the answers, but Pam, I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate being able to talk with Dr. Baker here and be on the same screen with her after everything she's gone through the last couple of weeks. But I think that we have all just got to remember that the numbers don't lie. There are more of us. There are more of us who support these common sense laws and legislation. And we need to keep spreading that message so people don't think it's hopeless. Or we need to get out there and educate people. And Carolina Forward will be doing that with targeted digital ads on specific issues and upcoming elections. We're going to be doing that in the coming months. We're going to do more polling so that people and lawmakers have an idea of where North Carolina's voters actually stand on these issues, so that they're not just believing what conservatives are handing to them, so they do feel safe in voting the will of the people and making the right choices. So we're going to keep doing that. Again, check out our TikTok if you haven't already. You said you're on there, you follow our Instagram, Pam, so check out our TikTok. Our executive director, Blair's got some great videos that kind of break down the North Carolina legislature and make it understandable for younger generations who we really want to engage,
right,
to get out that vote, because they're going to be so important in upcoming elections.
They are very important. Very, very, very important. My eldest daughter, who is an environmental worker, and she's a professor at UNC Chapel Hill in geography, she said, "Oh, Mom, this was a good show. I'm going to follow Carolina Forward." So she's
yay
house for all of this type of work that you're doing and what have you. But
love to hear it.
I tell you, it's you know what? I get so frustrated, and that's how. I have this women's political group on Facebook, and I get mad. I can't even remember what I got mad at. It was something about Trump. And the show came about. So every time I get upset about something, I start something. But listen, I want you guys to please, please, please come back. Invite your friends, your colleagues. Listen, if everybody did their little bit, our little bits add up into a snowball, and it has a bigger impact and effect. Everybody can do something. This is my something.
And can I also offer that many people don't know that anytime we're in session, on the House side, you can see and hear us. All you have to do is go to ncleg.gov and click on that where it says video. On the Senate side, they offer audio only. But you still can listen. Anytime that committees are being held, you can go onto that same website. You can see what committees are convening that day, and you can tap on the link and you can listen in, and you can also ask to speak at those committees. And so a lot of people don't know that. that you do have the ability to listen and hear and still be participatory. Before COVID, the only way that you could hear what was going on was to actually go to Raleigh. But now you do have an opportunity to be a part of that process.
All right. All right. Well, that's very good to know. And you know what? It's interesting. The pandemic did lend us, I mean, it's been a total shift, right? But here we are. I never thought I'd be doing shows virtually or anything like that. And you can do so much because of what the lessons we learned during COVID, right? Yeah.
I
Well,
have to say, Dr. Baker, that after watching that live feed, when your partner seatmate was speaking and seeing that occur, I was so upset that I went out yesterday to one of those places where you get to throw axes at the targets because I had to get some of that out.
It was, and it's one of those things that when it happens to you, I'm a quick thinker. So I would have been ready to fire right back because I hit as soon as he said it, I hit my light. But he is a thinker, right? And so it really set in on him after he kind of was able to walk away and kind of just reflect on what had just occurred to him. And again, he is a gentle soul. And that is why we work, right? Because he pulls me off the ledge. But I am ready always to go to battle for him because that's not what he does. So we work together. And I will say this, that we are fighting. Our fights look different. I was told that as I am down there longer, that my floor debates will get shorter, and that I should work on making them shorter. And I said, this is coming from a man who refuses to use his voice and allow others to speak for you. I will never get shorter. I will take as much time as I need to make the points that I need. And then he came back and he said, I hope I didn't offend you. I said, to offend me means that I would really care about what you have to say, which I do not. So no, I'm not offended. And that's that.
And that's that. I was just responding to Mitzi Turner. I believe she's wondering what happened with Abe and Representative Abe Jones and the Iredell County Republican Jeff McNeely. Just Google it. It's all over the internet.
Go to MSNBC. That's where it's really trending. And I would love to have told you could go back to our NC YouTube, but they have now stopped allowing you to go back and do reviews. We can't even do grabs anymore. And again, that is their attempt to try to suppress what happens in that chamber. But thank God people are still recording. But MSNBC is is where it first showed. And you Google that on any of their Twitter platforms and it's going to come up.
It's all over the place. If you Google it, you'll see it. You can't miss it. You cannot miss it. Well, ladies, I have so enjoyed you. I am so thankful that you all were able to come. I'm going to call our friend as soon as we sign off to find out where he was.
Something may have happened.
Yes,
he didn't answer my call either.
I hope that I don't even want to think that, but But at any rate, please know you have an open invitation to come back. Nicole, this was about my third request to Carolina Forward. Can you send me somebody over here to come on my show? And I was so happy to finally get a response. So thank you guys. Thank you. All right. Well, let's wave off goodbye to everyone. And next week, we'll be back with another live show. And I have no idea who will be on it, but we'll be back. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.